May I invite Angel Mary Rose to compare the session today?
Okay.
ഹലോ ഗുഡ് ഈവനിങ് എവരിവൺ. ഞാൻ ഏഞ്ചൽ മേരി റോസ്, പത്തനംതിട്ട ജില്ലാ പ്രൊഫഷൻ ഓഫീസും ജില്ലാ നിയമസേവന അതോറിറ്റിയും ഡയറക്ട് ജസ്റ്റിസ് സർവീസ് ഫൗണ്ടേഷനും സംയുക്തമായി സംഘടിപ്പിക്കുന്ന നേർവഴി പ്രോഗ്രാമിന്റെ 15ാമത്തെ സെഷനാണിന്ന്. ഇന്നത്തെ സെഷനിൽ വെൽക്കം സ്പീച്ച് പറയാനായി അഡ്വക്കേറ്റ് ബിനോ ജോർജ് സാറിനെ ക്ഷണിക്കുന്നു.
ബിനോ സാർ മ്യൂട്ട് ആണേ.
കേൾക്കാമോ?
Yes.
Am I audible? കേൾക്കാമോ സാർ?
Yes.
Okay. So, good evening everybody. ഇന്ന് നമ്മൾ ക്ലാസ് എടുക്കാനായിട്ട് എത്തിയിട്ടുള്ളത് ടിസിലെ പ്രൊഫസറും അതുപോലെ തന്നെ പ്രയാസിന്റെ പ്രോജക്ട് ഡയറക്ടറുമായുള്ള ഡോക്ടർ വിജയരാഘവനാണ്. സർ, വിത്ത് ഓൾ പ്രൗഡ് ആൻഡ് പ്രിവിലേജ് ഐ എക്സ്റ്റെൻഡ് അവർ ഹാർട്ടി വെൽക്കം ടു യു.
Thank you.
Then ഇനി നമുക്കുള്ളത് സോഷ്യൽ ജസ്റ്റിസ് ഡിപ്പാർട്ട്മെന്റ് അസിസ്റ്റന്റ് ഡയറക്ടർ ആയിട്ടുള്ള സുഭാഷ് കുമാർ സാറാണ്. അദ്ദേഹത്തെ ഈ ഒരു ചടങ്ങിലേക്ക് ആദരപൂർവ്വം ക്ഷണിക്കുന്നു. ഇനിയുള്ളത് LGRFന്റെ പ്രധാനപ്പെട്ട സംഘാടകര്, പിന്നെ ഇന്നത്തെ പാർട്ടിസിപ്പൻസ് എല്ലാവരെയും ഒറ്റ വാക്കിൽ ഹൃദയപൂർവ്വം സ്വാഗതം ചെയ്തുകൊള്ളുന്നു. നന്ദി.
താങ്ക് യു സർ. ഇനി ഇന്നത്തെ സെഷൻ ലീഡ് ചെയ്യുന്നതിനായി പ്രൊഫസർ ഡോക്ടർ വിജയ് രാഘവൻ സാറിനെ ക്ഷണിച്ചുകൊള്ളുന്നു. വെൽക്കം സർ.
Sir mute ആണേ, വിജയരാഘവൻ sir.
Yeah, thank you. So, should I start?
Yes sir, please.
Yeah. Yes.
Sure.
Yes. Okay.
Bye, beta. Bye. Bye, ma.
Can you see the screen?
Yes sir, we can see.
Can you see this PPT that I'm showing?
Yes.
It's called Criminal Justice Social Work. Hello?
Yes sir, we can see that.
Okay.
We can see.
Okay. So I have been asked to talk about the role of volunteers and NGOs in supporting probation services. But I thought that before I get into that topic, I would like to talk a little bit about the context. And the context that we are talking about today is the field which is known as criminal justice social work. Or in other words, we are talking about social work practice within the field of criminal justice. Now, when we are talking about social work practice in the field of criminal justice, we can broadly categorize it into two groups. One is social work with victims of crimes and their families, and the other is social work with offenders and their families. Today, we will focus more on the latter, which is social work practice with offenders and their families. And in that context, what has been the situation in India, how it has emerged over a period of time, and what are some of the important aspects is what I will be discussing with you. Is this going all right? The speed of my talk?
Yes, sir.
And I am not familiar with Malayalam, sorry, so I cannot speak in Malayalam. I'll have to do this lecture in English. Is that okay?
Of course, sir. No problem.
Yeah, okay. So before we get into social work practice in the field of criminal justice, I think we should look at what are some of the features of the criminal justice system per se. What do we mean when we talk about the criminal justice system? And this particular slide tells us a little bit about the features of the criminal justice system. The first thing that we need to keep in mind when we are talking about the criminal justice system is that the main function of the criminal justice system is maintenance of law and order. And therefore, the law and order objective will always take precedence over the rehabilitation objective of the criminal justice system, whether we like this or not. As social workers and probation officers and volunteers and NGOs, we would like the rehabilitation goal to take first priority. But unfortunately, the system's first priority is not rehabilitation. The system's first priority is maintenance of law and order. So that's the first thing that we need to keep in mind. Then we also need to be aware of the fact that we are working in a system which is bound by rules, laws, and procedures. Everything moves by laws. Without laws, without rules and procedures, nothing in this system ever moves. Even if you want to enter the prison, you need to have proper legal written permission to go inside the prison. If you are a probation officer, you have to have your identity card and everything with you all the time, whenever. If you are not a probation officer, you are a volunteer or an NGO and you want to go inside, you cannot enter that premise without having the proper permission. Even after going inside, there are so many rules and regulations that you need to follow. You cannot take certain items with you inside. Once you enter the system, your full checkup will be done, physical. They will frisk you if required. They will ask you to deposit all the personal items outside, and you cannot allow to carry anything other than a pen and a paper and all those things that come with the being in part of the criminal justice system. So that's the second thing that we need to keep mindful of. We need to be mindful of. Then there is the issue of hierarchy and discipline. This is a system which functions on the basis of hierarchy. And you have to be very careful how you address people. Who is senior, who is junior, whose rank is what. These are some things that you need to always keep in mind. And also the fact that this system highly is a system which is functions on the basis of discipline. And therefore, we also need to be careful about this issue. The fourth thing about the criminal justice system, which we need to be aware of, is the fact that it does not encourage entry of outsiders into the system. So therefore, only people who are legally entitled to interact in the system, they are the only people who are allowed to enter the system. So which means that it is police, prisons, prison officers, correctional officers, judges, the lawyers. These are the only people who have entry into the system. Others can enter only with the permission of the authorities concerned. And general public does not have any access. So in that sense, this is the only system that we have in a democracy which is closed to the public. Public has no access to institutions of criminal justice, especially custodial institutions. You can go and sit in a court. Nobody will stop you from going and sitting in a court and watch the proceedings that are going on. You can go to the police station if you have some complaint or something to talk about. You can't just enter a police station and say, I have come here to just see how things are going on. That will not be allowed. And prison And custodial institutions and correctional institutions, there is no question of you being allowed to enter unless you have a specific purpose, and that purpose is mentioned in writing, and which is authorized by the higher authorities of the prison department. The next point that I want to focus and talk about is that in this system, there is resistance to change. Resistance to change both from the system and from the clients, from the target population with whom you are going to work. There is overall a feeling that whatever each person is doing, they are doing the right thing. It is very difficult for us to talk about changing any aspect of the system or to change the lifestyle or the behavior of the people with whom we are going to work. That is again a very common thing that you can find in any part of the criminal justice system. Lastly, another very another very important feature of the criminal justice system is you will find that there is over-representation of minorities. What does this mean, over-representation of minorities? Can anyone take a guess? What does it mean, over-representation of minorities? Hello? Anybody? Can someone volunteer and say what does this mean?
Can you please repeat that question?
What is meant by over-representation of minorities in the criminal justice system?
Don't have an exact answer, sir.
Okay. Over-representation of minorities means that this system is compared to the population of the Dalits, tribals, and minority communities in the general population. In the criminal justice system, whether it is police statistics or prison statistics or court statistics, you will find that they are more represented than their population in the general population. Is that clear? So, for example, if the Muslim population in the general population is 15%, in prison you will find it more than 15%. It will be, so if you look at the current Indian statistics, there is a report that is brought out by NCRB, National Crime Records Bureau, which is called the Prison Statistics India Report. And every year the report shows the population of people inside prison on the basis of caste and on the basis of religion. And it shows that more than 70 to 80% of the population in prison consists of Dalits, tribals, OBCs, and minorities. And if you only take Dalits, tribals, and minorities, it is more than 60%. Now, does that tell you something about the system? Why are our prisons so much overrepresented by people from these minority communities?
It is biased towards the rich population, to the majority.
That could be. Okay, that could be one reason. Any other? Any other reason? By the way, this is not true only about India. This is true about all other countries as well. Even in the most advanced nations, America, for example, the prisons are full of non-white population. Blacks, Asians, Latinos, Spanish, all the minority communities are overcrowded in the prisons of America. So it is not only about India, it is across the world. You'll find that the minority communities are overrepresented. So one reason, as you said, could be that there is a bias against the minority communities, and they are likely to be arrested more in proportion to the majority community. But there could also be some other reasons.
They're socially and economically deprived.
Correct. Correct. So they are socially and economically deprived, so they are likely to have less chances of getting income through legal sources. So these are the two main reasons why you find that they are overrepresented in prisons. So these are some of the factors that we need to keep in mind when we are talking about the criminal justice system. Okay, can I move on? Can I move on, please?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Little bit about the history of criminal justice social work across the world and in the Indian scenario. The first time a social worker or a probation officer was introduced into the justice system was as way back in the late 19th century. The first juvenile court was set up in Chicago in Illinois state in 1899. And that was the first time it was felt that children are different from adults. And so children in conflict with law should be treated separately from adult offenders. The probation system itself developed in the mid 19th century. And I'm sure by now you would have been taught something about the history of probation. Have you been taught the history of probation? Sorry, I didn't hear. The founder of probation system, you know who it is? Have you heard of the name John Augustus? Hello? Hello? I need a little bit of participation. Otherwise, I cannot teach. That's my style of teaching. I cannot teach. Yes, John Augustus. So you have been taught about John Augustus in your course?
Sir, probation officers are well known about
No,
him, but
the people who are attending this
I think not,
program, are they little bit aware about the history of probation? You know, Abin? Abin?
Sir, another session will be conducted in the next week.
So not yet.
In that section, yes, sir.
No, so till now they haven't been taught. Huh?
Not in detail, sir. Not in
yet.
detail.
Okay.
But
Okay. Okay.
I mean, it was mentioned as like a brief we got.
Yeah. Okay.
Only explained about the probation. Only taught about the Probation
Offenders Act.
Yes, sir.
No, it's very important to know the history.
Yes, sir.
Because the act comes from a particular philosophy. And that philosophy is that way back in 19th century, there was this bootmaker called John Augustus. And he was also a member of the Total Abstinence Society in America, in Boston, in Massachusetts. Total Abstinence Society meaning he was promoting the non-use of alcohol. He was passing by a court, a local court, and he just decided to drop into the court and see what was going on. And at that time, there was a court which was trying the case of a person who had been arrested and brought before them for drunken behavior. So John Augustus got up and he told the judge that, my lord, instead of sending this person to jail, why don't you hand him over to me for 2 weeks and I will reform him. So for some reason, the judge thought, okay, let me take a chance. And he ordered that this person who was arrested for drunken behavior is handed over to John Augustus for his reformation. After 2 weeks, when he came back to court, this man was apparently reformed. He had given up drinking. And John Augustus told him that, instead of sending everyone to jail, you can actually reform people by taking them back to the community and supervise them while they are in the community. Since then, in the rest of his life, John Augustus took more than 2,000 cases and he supervised them. And that is how the system of probation started, first in America, and then it spread across the world. So probation system is the first official system of introducing social workers into the criminal justice system. Because otherwise, criminal justice system, as you all know, consists of people who have nothing to do with social work. You have lawyers, judges, police officers, prison officers. What do social workers have to do with that? Probation is the first time that social workers were officially introduced and they were made part of the criminal justice system. As far as India is concerned, the first attempt to bring social work intervention into the legal system was in the Reformatory Schools Act, which was passed in 1897 during the British rule. This Reformatory Schools Act was essentially legislated for the reformation and rehabilitation of youthful offenders, those who were juveniles, minor boys. And for them, this Reformatory Schools Act was enacted, where you had probation officers appointed for the rehabilitation of juveniles in conflict with law or children in conflict with law. Then the other thing that I would like to tell you is that Tata Institute of Social Sciences, from which I come from, has also played a very important role in the rehabilitation of prison populations. It was set up in 1936. It is the first college of social work in India. And it is through the post-independence period, after India got independence, that the first Prime Minister of India, Jawaharlal Nehru, he invited a United Nations expert on correctional administration, a very world-famous criminologist by the name of Walter C. Reckless. Mr. Reckless, Professor Reckless came to India and he stayed in India for almost a year. And he spent more than 6 months in the TIS campus, Tata Institute of Social Sciences. And he helped in setting up of the correctional framework in India. And it is because of his efforts that the Probation of Offenders Act was passed in 1958 in India. Then you had the Children's Act and the formation of aftercare associations and the discharged prisoners aid associations. These were all set up in different parts of the country, including in Tamil Nadu and Andhra Pradesh and Uttar Pradesh. Quite a few states, they set up these discharged prisoners aid societies, basically to provide rehabilitation support to prisoners. And at all these institutions, social workers were involved in some way or the other, either as probation officers or as welfare officers or as volunteers. So, what is the context of criminal justice social work that we are talking about? Is that we are working with people who are processed by the criminal justice system, either as offenders or as victims. They are processed by the criminal justice system. That is the first point that we need to keep in mind when we are talking about social work in criminal justice. The second point is, most of the people we are working with, they come from marginalized communities, either socially marginalized or economically marginalized. So that is the second point that we need to keep in mind. The third important point that we need to keep in mind is we are essentially dealing with individuals who have some problem with the family or the community or the state. These people are seen as people with behavior problems. They have alcohol problem, they have drug problem, they are violent, or they are seen as people who don't want to work. So there is some kind of a conflict between the individual and the rest of society. So that is a typical characteristic of people who are we are working with in the criminal justice system. That is not the case in other settings. Suppose you are working with cancer patients or their family members, you will not come across this issue there. Suppose you're working with people from poor sections of society, you will not come across this problem there. But if you're working with people in the criminal justice system, you are likely to come across individuals who have some kind of a conflict with the family or the community or the state. Then the other thing that is typical about people in the criminal justice system with whom we work is that they all face social stigma. Community and family and state does not treat them as equals. They are treated as second-class citizens. They find difficulty in finding shelter. They find difficulty in finding relationships. They find difficulty in finding jobs. And lastly, they have some association with criminal elements or exploitative elements, either as co-accused or as accomplices or as people who are pushed them into the sector. Is this okay up till now? Is it going okay?
Okay, sir. Okay. Okay.
Yes,
Yeah, is it making sense what I'm talking?
yes sir.
Okay.
Are you able to grasp what I'm trying to say?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. Because I'm
Yes, sir. Yes.
I'm worried if
Yes, sir.
yes, Abhi, I'm worried if language issue is becoming a problem.
No problem, sir.
No.
We
Okay.
can understand. We can.
Okay.
We are getting it.
Okay. Therefore, when we talk about social work in criminal justice, there are two parts to it. One is institutional social work and the other is community-based social work. Institutional social work means when you are working with the person while the person is in custody. The person may be in prison, the person may be in a children's home, the person may be in a beggar's home, the person may be in aftercare home. So while you are working with the person when the person is in custody, and the other is when you are working with the person after the person has been released from custody. So that is the community-based social work. Second point is that many of these people are facing social exclusion. That means society has not accepted them. And secondly, some of them have even faced loss of citizenship. How is that happening? Loss of citizenship. They don't have access to documents. Many of these people you will find, they don't have ration card, or they don't have Aadhaar card, or they don't have caste certificate. They don't have a voter identity card. So because of that, they don't get access to government schemes and programs. So what is the role of social work in this context? The role of social work is to develop their capacities as individuals, to strengthen their families and the communities from where they work. So this is where our role starts. You are working with a population which is socially stigmatized. You're working with a population which has a conflict with families or with the communities. You're working with a population who does not have full access to citizenship rights. And in this context, you have to work with these people. So you have huge challenges in front of you. You are working with people who is very, very difficult for them to get back to society. So how are we going to do it? One is by strengthening their legal rights. How do we do that? By providing them with legal aid and guidance, by making them aware about their rights, by giving them information about the schemes and programs that are available for people from marginalized sections. Like I told you, most of them come from marginalized sections. Most of them are either Dalits or tribals or Muslims or other communities from marginalized sections, BPL families, below poverty line families. So if they have proper access to documents, then they can get benefit of government schemes and programs. So if we can make them aware about how to develop, get your caste certificate, or how to get the various documents that are required for eligibility for these welfare programs, then maybe some of them could take benefit of those programs and they can become part of the mainstream. So one is making them aware about their rights, giving them information about their of the various schemes and programs of the government. And the third is to help them get back into society by constantly doing follow-up with them and their families, and by providing them with moral support and emotional support. So the range of responses are psychosocial and socio-legal interventions. So it includes emotional support, relief and emergency assistance, capacity building of them, then doing advocacy with the government and the local authorities, and promoting their citizenship and human rights. This is the range of interventions that is required to be done if you are going to work with people who are affected by the criminal justice system. Now, one point that you must remember here is that in this entire process, power, authority, and conflict is a continuous underlying feature. You are working with people who are caught in a system which is characterized by use of power, use of authority, and there is a conflict which is existing between that person and the system, or with that person and the family, or with that person and the community. And finally, if you want to talk about rehabilitation, you have to achieve a system, you have to achieve what one can call as moving from anonymity to anonymity. Now, what does this mean? Moving from anonymity to anonymity. I'll explain. Before a person got arrested, he or she was an anonymous person. You know what is anonymous? What is anonymous?
Not having an identity.
Correct. Like you and me. We are anonymous in the sense that we are not known to people. We may be known to our family members. We may be known to our friends. We may be known in the community, but we are not like some well-known politician or some well-known author or some well-known artist who are known to everybody. We are anonymous people. We are member of some community, right? Before the person gets arrested, they are anonymous, right? They are like any other person, either a worker or a housewife or a father, some like members of society. When they get arrested and when they go into jail, they don't remain anonymous anymore. Everybody comes to know about them. They get to be called as jailbird, somebody who has gone to prison, somebody who has been arrested by the police. So the challenge for us as social workers is to once again make them anonymous. Their criminal identity should be lost. They should not be anymore known as a person who came from jail. That is the real challenge of rehabilitation, which is why rehabilitation is not a one-time affair. And rehabilitation is something that takes years together. So your support is something that is going to be required for a long period of time. Because any time the past will catch up with that person. Suppose he is going somewhere on the walking, he has found a job, he's maybe even got married, and the person is walking on the street, some constable will see him and say, hey, you were a person who were once in prison, what are you doing now? And it's possible that in front of the public he may insult him, and he might even question his credentials. That will create hurdles in his rehabilitation. He will get depressed that even after doing all this, at the end of the day, I was insulted by the police on the road. And so what is the use of doing all this? At such points, they need a person to whom they can talk to. They need a person who can give them proper guidance and counseling. Now, some of the challenges that we are finding today is that social workers are getting fewer and fewer within the criminal justice system. The role of probation officers, who are the trained social workers, is getting more and more reduced in our country because the real value of probation officers is not being seen by the system. Kerala is an exception. I am very happy to say that in Kerala, the probation department is doing a great job, and the government has also realized the importance of probation system in Kerala. But rest of the country, except Bihar and Kerala, these are the two exceptions that I find in our country, where probation system is being given some importance. Everywhere else, probation is almost becoming defunct. The posts of probation officers are lying vacant. Probation officers are not being treated properly. Their work conditions, their salary, everything is quite unfortunately less than other departments, and therefore very few people are coming forward, and even who are there are not motivated to work. So in this kind of a system, how does one revive the criminal probation system in this country? And it is in that context that the program that has been started by the District Probation Office in Pathanamthitta is really, I would say, it's going to be a game changer. And if this model succeeds, it can be touted as a model that can be replicated in the entire country. Wherever I have interacted with probation officers, I have been told that we don't have staff, we don't have money to help people, we don't have vehicle to go to far off places for home visits, judges don't bother about us, when we go to them we don't get cases, etc. etc. Long list of complaints. So wherever in training programs that I have interacted with probation officers, we start with what are the challenges of working in the field. Slowly the discussion moves to what are the challenges of being a probation officer, because then they start talking about their own problems, and this indicates that this is a serious problem. Every time we talk about finding a solution, there seems to be some block because of which the solution cannot be found. Now, I was looking at, we have been looking at the rules, probation of offender rules that exist in different states. Most of the states have a provision to appoint voluntary probation officers. And they also have rules to appoint part-time probation officers. And they have rules to appoint voluntary organizations as recognized to work in the field of probation. But I am really surprised, despite having these rules for the last more than 30-40 years, none of the states have used these provisions and appointed part-time probation officers or voluntary probation officers, or have recognized NGOs to work in the field of probation. So they don't have staff, their positions are lying vacant, plus they have not even used the provision in the rules under which they can appoint voluntary probation officers or NGOs. So therefore, this program that has been designed is specifically to see how volunteers and NGOs can support the work of probation officers in a particular district is very, very important, at least as far as I'm concerned, because I think it's a new experiment that is being tried out and we should support it in whatever way it is possible. Now let's come to the main topic that we have for today. What can be the role of volunteers and probation NGOs in supporting the work of probation officers? According to me, somebody has raised a hand. No. Okay. Are we going all right up till now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. The role of the volunteer and the probation and the NGO when it comes to the rehabilitation is very clear, because no person can be rehabilitated without community support. At some point or the other, the lack of community support will always become a hurdle for the rehabilitation of them, especially those who have a criminal background and who have been facing a social stigma. So what is it that volunteers and NGOs can do is they can act as the link between the community and the individual and his or her family. And how can this be done? Firstly, once a case has been referred to a probation officer, then the probation officer will initially pay a home visit and do a home inquiry report. And after the home inquiry report is made, the probation officer might recommend that probation should be granted to this individual. And if the magistrate recommends that probation should be granted, if the magistrate decides that probation is going to be granted, the magistrate will have two options: either to release the person on a bond of good behavior or to release the person on supervision. In both scenarios, the role of volunteers and NGO is there, according to me. So when it comes to releasing a person on a bond of good behavior, what does it mean? It means that this person will be made to sign a bond that I will behave myself and I will not violate the terms and conditions of the probation order, and I will be a good citizen for a period of 1, 2, or 3 years, depending on the bond being for 1, 2, or 3 years. The minimum bond period is 1 year. The maximum bond period is 3 years. This is under Section 4 of the Probation of Offenders Act. The probation officer's job ends the moment the magistrate passes an order where he or she says that now this person is released on bond of good behavior. Just a minute. Okay. Yeah. So now, what happens to this person after he or she has been released on a bond of good behavior? Who is keeping track of this person? What about the problems that this person is going to face? I have explained to you. 1 minute. Sorry. I have explained to you all the issues and problems that people with a criminal background face. But now we are talking about probation with release on bond of good behavior. Who is going to keep track of those people? Typically what happens is, once they sign the bond of good behavior, they think they have been pardoned off. The general impression amongst the probationers is that they have been pardoned off, and that's the end of the story as far as they are concerned. That's the end of the story as far as the magistrate is concerned. That's the end of the story as far as the probation officer is concerned. What happens to that person after he or she gets released on a bond of good behavior? Where does this person go? Whether that person requires any further assistance, whether that person requires help with regard to a job, whether that person requires any kind of counseling support, all of this is not taken care of under the current Section 4 of the PO Act for people who are released on bond of good behavior. So I think probation, NGOs and volunteers have a very, very important role to play with regard to this category of people who have been released on a bond of good behavior. My suggestion would be that for every person being released on a bond of good behavior, the probation officer should connect that person with an NGO or a volunteer who will be available to this person, firstly as a sounding board. So if there's any problem in that person's life, at least that person has somebody to go and talk to, preferably somebody who is available to that person in that area. So if you are living in a particular area or in a particular locality and you know somebody you can go to meet informally, and that person doesn't stay very far away, like at least within the district or within the city or the town, and if possible within the area where the person is living, then I can have that confidence that if I have a problem, I know I can go and meet this person and this person might be able to help me. Secondly, having a local person in that area could also mean that the volunteer or the NGO representative can also regularly meet that person by maybe making a home visit once in 2-3 months or once a month initially maybe once a month, and then maybe after 6 months maybe once in 3 months, and then maybe once a year, and slowly tapering it off. So either through home visits or with telling the person to contact him whenever he or she has a problem, or a mix of both. This is only possible through a set of volunteers and NGO workers, because the probation officer staff is too limited. They cannot keep a follow-up of all the cases who have been released on a bond of good behavior. So the first role that I can see for a volunteer or an NGO worker is to keep a follow-up in the cases of people who have been released on a bond of good behavior. Secondly, they may require certain kinds of services. Like, for example, they may require temporary shelter. They may require some kind of emergency financial assistance. They may require medical support. They may require help with regard to vocational training. And finally, they may require help with regard to family conflict and family counseling. These are the kind of roles that I see that probation officers' support system can play, either in terms of volunteers or in terms of NGO workers. Another thing that they can do is with regard to helping them get their documents. So suppose they don't have a bank account, or suppose they don't have a voter ID card or a caste certificate. Can they be given the proper information of how to get that done, and also guided in the process? So suppose you require certain eligibility documents, then how to get those eligibility documents? All this obviously means that the people who are going to be associated with the probation officer as a volunteer or an NGO worker, they have to first get trained in all these things. If they don't have the knowledge and the information and the skills, obviously they won't be able to help the others. Secondly, with regard to people who have been released on supervision, the primary responsibility here lies with the probation officer, because the probation officer has to submit reports to the judge at regular intervals to say that whether the person has been properly being supervised or not. Mostly what I find, I'm not talking about Kerala, mostly what I find is supervision simply means calling the person to his office once a month, making him sign a register and letting him go. What is that person doing? Whether the person has actually reformed, whether he or she requires any kind of assistance or help, this is not really looked into. And I'm not blaming the probation officers for this. The reasons are again the same. They are short staffed and they don't have the financial resources to help. And they also don't have the attitude or the motivation to do something out of the box. So even if we don't have resources, we can always tap the resources that are available through the NGO sector and help these cases. So when it comes to people who are being supervised, I think the probation officer's job is to see where is it that I need help in order to rehabilitate this person who is on supervision, and accordingly request volunteers or NGOs to support. So say for example, the person needs some kind of skill training. So one can identify an NGO which is providing skill training and connect this person with that organization so that this person can get the kind of skill training that the person requires. If it is a person who is facing severe depression, then you need to find an organization which can help in providing regular counseling support. So depending on the need of each case, the role of the volunteer on the NGO can be worked out. What I will do now is I will stop here in terms of what I wanted to say as far as the role of the volunteer and the NGO is concerned with regard to providing support services to probation officers. And I will open up now more for questions from your side, and if there are any comments, and also what you think, the suggestions that I have made. Before I end, I want to just also add one more thing. In our experience of working in Prayas, which has been working for the rehabilitation of offender populations for now more than 30 years, there are 4 aspects to rehabilitation. The first one is stable shelter. Person needs to have a stable shelter. A roof under your head is very important for somebody to feel psychologically, financially, emotionally stable. If I'm living on the street, or if I'm living in a place where I don't know if tomorrow I will be able to go and stay there, then it can be a big problem and a hurdle for rehabilitation. So the first thing is stable shelter. Even if it is temporary shelter, but stable shelter. That is where there is an importance for the concept of probation hostel, where people who don't have immediate shelter, they can go there and stay there for up to 6 months or up to 1 year till they are able to find something of their own. So that's the first point. The second point is stable relationships, positive relationships. Remember, person who was in the crime field has lot of negative peer relationships. And if we are asking this person to give up his negative peer relationships, we have to be able to substitute it with positive peer relationships or family relationships. We cannot expect that person to give up on his or her past if we have not made sufficient efforts to replace the earlier relationships with some positive relationships. This is where NGO can come in and play a very important role, because social workers who are part of the NGO or the volunteer who has been appointed can be like a substitute relationship for this person, like a moral support, like an emotional support, somebody you can go and talk to if you are in a feeling depressed or you are in some kind of a crisis. So stable relationships is a very important factor for the rehabilitation of people. The third one is a very obvious one: stable legal employment, legal source of livelihood, stable legal livelihood. That's the third one. Again, that means helping the person with vocational training, helping the person set up some small business of their own, or helping the person get a job, etc., etc. And the fourth thing I would say is being able to get oneself out of any kind of substance abuse. So essentially what one is talking about is that freedom from addiction of drugs and addiction of alcohol. These are always, they become hurdles in rehabilitation, because you may have found a good job, you may have a good relationship with somebody, but because you have an alcohol problem, all of that can go down the drain. Okay, again, new incident can happen. You may have a fight with somebody that can have a repercussion. It can lead to a violent behavior, and that can put you back in prison. Also, in the case of drug addiction, we know many people go back to theft and robbery and dacoity and those kind of offenses because they want to somehow continue with the drug habit. So freedom from addiction, especially drugs and alcohol, is very important. So these are the 4 important aspects which are important from the point of view of rehabilitation. And in all these 4 aspects, role of volunteers and role of NGOs can play a very important role. I'll stop here. Thank you.
ഇനി ആർക്കെങ്കിലും എന്തെങ്കിലും ഡൗട്ട് ഉണ്ടെങ്കിൽ സാറിനോട് ചോദിക്കാന്നാണ്. സാറ് ക്ലാരിഫൈ ചെയ്ത് തരും.
Sir, myself Gino. Thank you for the wonderful session. And the last point which we have mentioned regarding the 4 points which is required for the rehabilitation. I think NGOs or volunteers, they have a limitation to provide these 4 points which you have said, like especially with regard to financial assistance or to help them to find out an employment, or they are not able to give an employment, but they can help them to find out an employment, right? And also with regard to the shelter. In the beginning stages or in the kind of an NGO working in Kerala and all, I don't think that they can immediately help them to get a shelter. It is not an immediately possible thing. So, but I think government has a major role in this. Government can do certain things in that. But on one side, I need to say that. On the other side, I don't know how we can present it before the society, because we want to say that we have to rehabilitate this particular person who has done some kind of wrong, and we have to rehabilitate him, and we want to provide him employment, we want to assist him financially, we want to give him a shelter. How we can make in this, like these are on 2 different hands, but we want to weigh it equally, and then only we can say that this is possible in this society, right?
Yeah, very, very important and good question. I know that it's not an easy job, and that is why the reason why I have made my presentation the way I have done it is to give you a sense that if you are entering this field, you better be aware that you are entering a difficult field. You are not entering an easy field. You are entering a field and you are going to be working with a person who faces or may be facing multiple handicaps. Now the question is, how can we do this? I don't have any quick fix answer to this, but I know that it is possible through networking. That's the only way forward. So suppose we are talking about shelter. Okay. Now you are a volunteer. Suppose you obviously cannot provide shelter. You can't say, okay, you come and stay with me in my house. That's not practical. That can't be done, right? But through networking, can we have a directory of information of services available in your district or in your city about various kinds of services that are being provided in that city by the NGO sector and by the government? So, for example, there was a Supreme Court judgment some years back saying that in all big cities with population of more than 10 lakhs, they should set up homeless shelters, night shelters for homeless people. Now, we can tap that. If we know the list, if we know where these homeless shelters are there, it is just a night shelter, but it is better than staying on the footpath. So this is one. That is in the case of men. In the case of women, every district has some shelter home for women. So at least, if not the night shelter, they can be admitted to these shelter homes if there is a requirement. Thirdly, there could be NGOs which provide shelter, let's say, for street children. Now, sometimes in these street children shelters, you have also older people staying there. Those who are 18, 19, 20, up to that age also, they sometimes allow. So can you do a tie-up with some shelter providing organization to say that this is a work that I am doing, and I am doing this in collaboration with the district probation office, and the district probation officer can also facilitate that process. Okay, you identify a resource, then you talk to the DPO. The DPO says, okay, come, I'll come with you, and we will find a way to say, okay, in this shelter we will allow 2 people at a time, not more than that. Maximum we will allow 2 people to come and stay here for a maximum period of 3 months, not more than that. Okay, so some kind of practical solution has to be found with regard to each of these problems that one is talking about. Second point that I talked about when it comes to stable family, positive relationships, there are 2 ways to do it. One is you as a resource, as a positive influence on their life, okay, which means that you are available to them either on the phone or at some public place or in an office somewhere that person can come and meet you, etc., etc. Second is, if you can identify some local person, respectable person, could be a retired school teacher, it could be some local panchayat member, it could be a ward counselor, it could be somebody in that, it could be an NGO representative with whom you develop some kind of a contact to say, this person lives in your area, he is a reformed person, he had a criminal past, but now he wants to reform himself. Can you provide some kind of a support to this person in terms of emotional and moral support? Nothing more than that. Thirdly, when it comes to livelihoods, I would suggest that you don't go into finding jobs for that person. You try to help that person to say, how can that person find a job for himself or herself? Either through supporting through vocational training, like if there are organizations which provide skill development. Now, under the National Skill Development Mission, there are so many skill development centers that have been set up. This vocational training providers. Can we link them up with these skill development centers? And if we link them up with the skill development center, after acquiring the skill, they themselves are doing the placement. Because if you try to find a job for somebody, you will have to reveal the background of that person. And then that person may not get the job. So I think your role should only be limited to helping the person get skilled, get trained through existing resources. So to kind of cut short a long story, the role of the volunteer or the NGO is to try and identify whatever resources are available in that city or in that district. Different types of services. Services for counseling, services for mental health, services for shelter, services for medical health, services for livelihoods. Any kind of services that are already available, if we maintain a directory of all those services and we develop a contact with those organizations, they could be government organizations, they could be voluntary organizations, and then try and see if those services can be made useful for your client with whom you are going to be working. But I would again say it's not an easy job at all. It requires a lot of dedication and it requires a lot of commitment. It is not something which can be achieved just like that. It will require some amount of perseverance on your side. I don't know if I've been able to answer your question.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It seems more practical, and also like we are also a part of LJRF is an NGO. we are also thinking about, doing certain kind of activities like this.
Yes.
So it seems more practical and a good recommendation for us to take it forward.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. I hope others have some concerns, then they can raise it, or you can put it in your chat box also. Sir, if they are not asking, please.
Thank you for your excellent presentation, sir. Sir, can you hear me, sir?
Yes, yes, yes.
Sir, Abin, sir.
Yes, yes.
Sir, as you said, we have to find out many resources for employment opportunities. But the problem, the employer is not ready to provide employment because the stigma attached with the conviction, that is released to prison.
Correct.
I want to seek your opinion about the physically disabled persons have some reservation in our country.
Yes, yes. Yes.
The offender or ex-convict is a socially disabled person.
Yeah. I fully agree with you on this point.
What is your opinion about?
Abin, I fully agree with you on this. That we need to create a category called socially disabled persons, and if not reservation, we can talk about a concept of enhanced access. Enhanced access means not reservation, but if there are two candidates having the same qualification, this person should be given preference. That is the meaning of enhanced access. While that happens, when that happens, I think we are very far away from that. But maybe it will be possible if we create a larger category called persons affected by criminal justice processing, which means we can include victims and offenders. If we talk only about offenders, I think that there will be a reaction to it from society. Can you hear me, Abhi?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So I was saying that, if you only talk about offenders, there might be an adverse reaction from members of the society. But if we talk of a broader category, if we say that people who get affected by criminal justice processing, who face stigma, both victims as well as offenders, then we might be able to achieve something. And if there is this concept of enhanced access in terms of jobs, either in the private sector or in the government departments, it might work. But till that happens, that's still a long way away. My suggestion would be, let us not try and find jobs for them, but let us make them capable of finding jobs. And this can be done through providing skill training through existing organizations, providing regular input sessions on finding jobs, linking them up with placement agencies, and doing various kinds of awareness, strengthening capacity building sessions with them. Like, how do you appear in an interview? How do you write your CV? Doing mock interviews with them, and those kind of exercises. So I think that our role should be limited to increasing their capacity for finding employment rather than finding employment for them.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
എല്ലാവരുടെയും ഡൗട്ട് ചോദിച്ച് കഴിഞ്ഞെന്ന് പ്രതീക്ഷിക്കുന്നു. താങ്ക് യു ഫോർ ഷെയറിംഗ് യുവർ വാല്യുബിൾ ഇൻഫർമേഷൻ. ഇനി Hi, Adnan Ismaili Shilpino.
And Angela, I guess we have time, so as like we got Vijay Raghavan sir, we want to utilize that time.
Sir.
We would like to know more about your prayers and activities, sir. Like,
Okay.
I believe it is in Maharashtra and how
Yes,
it is
yes.
working
Yeah.
there as well as
Yes.
parts of-
Yeah. Basically, Prayas started, from a very small effort. We had our teacher in the Department of Criminology and Correctional Administration at Tata Institute of Social Sciences. She was my teacher as well, and I was placed in the Arthur Road prison for my second year field work. As part of my MSW training, I was doing my field work there, and after I finished my master's degree, she asked me if we can start a field action project which can work with under trial prisoners. So that is how Prayas was started in 1990. We started in February 1990, and basic work of Prayas has been to try and see what difference can social workers make if they are appointed within the criminal justice system. So we, over the past 30 years, have been working in various prisons in Maharashtra and Gujarat. Gujarat in 2 prisons. In Maharashtra, we have worked in more than 7-8 prisons. And we have also worked at police station level. We have worked with DLSA, District Legal Services Authority, and we have worked in courts. Wherever we have appointed social workers to work within the system, we find that social workers are able to identify people who need specialized help, either in terms of psychosocial help or in terms of socio-legal help. So essentially, what our social workers do is they go into these institutions, prisons, women's institutions like rescue homes for women rescued from prostitution, protective homes, and children homes where children in conflict with law are there. And then they talk to people who are in custody, interact with them, and try to identify what are their problems, and then start responding to those problems. So they could mean providing them with legal aid through the District Legal Services Authority, talking to the legal aid authorities, ensuring that they are able to get a lawyer. It could mean writing an application for them if the person can't write themselves, and tell that person how to present it in court. It could mean follow up with the lawyer for people who already have a lawyer, because the lawyer is not in touch with the person anymore. Then it could include making a home visit and looking at the family situation of the person, or calling up that family member and asking them to come and visit the person in custody. It could mean helping the person with problems while they are in custody. So somebody might be ill and not getting proper medical attention. So taking it up with the prison authorities and requesting them to immediately attend to that person's problems. It could mean arranging activities and programs inside the custody, awareness sessions, also on vocational kind of activities, etc. So inside custody, there are a range of activities that the Prayas social workers try to do. Then outside custody, the process starts after the person comes out and approaches us for help. So out of maybe every 10 people that we work with, maybe 4 of them will come for help outside. The remaining 6 or 7 people may not contact us after release. So then we are focusing with those 3 or 4 people who will come to us after release. And then there'll again be a range of issues and problems. It could be related to immediate shelter. So like I said, we have arrangements with local shelter homes where we can refer them and they can go there and stay there for some time at least. We also have been able to raise funds through our project, where we can provide some immediate assistance in terms of room rent or house deposit, because some people have lost their access to their rented house because they have not paid rent for a long period of time. So we can negotiate with the landlord and say, okay, we'll pay 2 months rent, so you allow this person to come back into the house, things of that sort. Provide with emergency financial assistance, like a person may not have money to travel back home, so provide the traveling allowance, or the person may not have money to buy a pair of clothes also. So emergency assistance could mean some of these things. Then once the person starts settling down, then we start looking at the long-term problems like employment and other kinds of issues. There we focus on vocational training. Again, we don't run any vocational programs. It is again purely through networking. So we have a tie-up with some of these organizations which provide vocational training. So linking them up with those training programs, we may pay the fees. Like suppose somebody wants to do AC repair course, and there is an organization which is running AC repair program. We will request this person, the organization, to take him for that course. Whatever the fees is, we will try to pay the fees depending on whether the person has family support or not. So case by case, the work changes from one case to another, but largely it is around issues of legal aid, issues of family support, issues of vocational training, and issues of some kind of financial support depending on the emergency requirements of the case. So over the last 30 plus years, we have been working in some 8 or 9 districts with these populations, and we have been able to reach out to more than 40,000 individuals and their families. So that's been the nature of work that we have a large team. We have more than 60 people working in Prayas. They're all full-time working people with full salaries, for which we have to raise money, and we have been able to raise money, though it is not very easy. Raising money for working with offender populations is a very challenging job, but luckily we have been able to manage. So that is a kind of a brief account. I will put here in the chat box the Prayas TIS's website link. So it has more details about our work. You can go to the website and see more details. In the website, there is a link on outcomes and publications. That has a lot of reports of the work that we have done. So maybe you could look at that as well. Yeah, I'll just type the website link.
Sir.
Yes.
Sir, as you know, we are in the process of formation of a community-based organization for victims of crimes.
Yes.
Can you please share about your experiences and thoughts regarding the functions of CBO for victims?
In fact, I have responded to your document that you had sent me with my suggestions. And Abhin, okay. I found that document to be quite good.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Victims of crime, in my opinion, the type of services to be provided will not change drastically. Whether it is victims or whether it is offenders, they all come from the similar marginalized categories, and they will require similar kind of assistance. So therefore, I would say that, whether it is counseling or support to their children, education support to their children, livelihood support to the surviving members of the family, emotional and moral support, it's going to be these very services. And I would also tell you to consult an organization by the name of Disha Foundation, which is based in Amravati district in Maharashtra. And they have been working with victims and their families for the last more than 10 years. And they have done some good work. So I will send you if you send me an email, I will connect you with the director of that organization. His name is Praveen Khandpasole.
Okay, sir.
And then you can contact him for future, some guidance from that.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
So what are the challenges you faced when you went ahead with this Prayas project?
Uh, it's a very long question. Just a minute. Just a minute. Abin, I have put down the link for Disha on the chat box.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
What are the challenges? It all started very easy. In fact, it was initially we didn't face much of challenges when we started because the only challenge for us was to get permission to start working inside, and we got that permission very easily because we had a good relationship with the prison department. Because we had been placing students of social work uh, for field work in prisons. So then when we approached them for starting full-time work, they knew the kind of work that we were doing. They also knew that we are not in this field for publicity. And we are not the types who will run to the press every time some problem happens. The biggest fear that prison departments have is that if they allow outsiders to come into the system, the outsiders will see some of the things that are going on, for example, corruption or violence, and they will report about it in the media. Now, we very consciously took a decision that we are not going to do all that because we are not going to achieve much by doing that. We might be able to expose one incident, but it will not help us in the long run. So we decided that we will stick to the role that we have here, and we will slowly develop a rapport with the system whereby we can push for changes in laws and policies. So that approach has helped us in the long run. So initially, we instead of hurdles, we actually faced. We were also a lot of appreciation. We got a lot of appreciation. We got a lot of support. When we approached, for example, initial period when we went around looking for jobs for our clients, we went and made presentations before Rotary clubs and Lions clubs. We got excellent response. Many of those industrialists came forward and said, I will employ one person in my factory. I will employ two people in my factory. Those kind of responses. And they actually did. They actually did also. Similarly, when it came to funding, we were able to get funds also in the initial period. It's only as you grew more and more in terms of size and in terms of scale, and also the complexity of the work that you did, that the challenges started increasing. So if we had remained a small organization working in one district and doing the kind of work that we were doing, we would not have faced the kind of challenges that we are facing today. Today, there are many more challenges that we face, challenges relating to funding, challenges relating to giving proper salaries to our staff, because nobody can live on love and fresh air. Everybody needs a good salary to be able to work, and getting salaries for social workers is a big task because funders don't always like the idea of like 65% of our budget is going in salaries. And that is not something that everybody appreciates, because people want the money directly only for the clients. They feel this is a waste of money. But actually, without the social worker, no work is possible in this field. So there are those kind of challenges. Then there are challenges relating to administration of any large scale project. And then there are challenges relating to the system, because the system has always, we have maintained a kind of a relationship where we don't expose all that is going on inside, but we also don't keep quiet about it. We talk to the higher ups within the system about issues without identifying a particular individual for what is going on. So we don't complain about an individual, but we talk about the issue per se. So what is to be, and our focus is how to improve the system. So if we find there is lot of corruption happening in Mulakat, you know what is Mulakat? Mulakat is the interview that family members come to the prison for interview, right?
Yes, sir.
So sometimes we find corruption happening there. No, people asking money when there is no need to fill up a form and things of that. So then we intervene as a system that how can one improve the system. We recently did a study of how to improve family contact with prisoners, and we have submitted that report to many of the prison department heads, saying please look at this report and see how you can improve the family contact system. Family contact is very important from rehabilitation point of view. What should the prison department do to improve contact with families of prisoners? How good should the Mulakat room be? What are some of the minimum standards that should be maintained when somebody comes to visit their family member in prison? How to ensure that phone calls are allowed, or video conferencing ke through people can talk to their family members. So we have listed out a whole lot of recommendations based on the study that we did. So that's the kind of work that we do.
Thank you, sir.
In fact,
Okay, good to know.
Sir, it is known that Tata Institute of Social Science conducted a research on probation system and insider's view.
Yeah.
Sir, can you share about this impact of that study?
So this was in 2008. We did a statewide study on the implementation of the Probation of Offenders Act in the state of Maharashtra. And for this, we interviewed probation officers, prison officers, and judges across the state, and asked them what they think is the problem with the implementation of probation of offenders, and what they suggest to improve the implementation of probation of offenders. And we got some excellent suggestions from all these stakeholders. Those are then compiled in the form of a report, and that report we submitted to the Bombay High Court, because we had some good connections with the High Court senior High Court judge who was interested in the issue of probation. And then the High Court called a meeting of all the departments concerned. In Maharashtra, probation is implemented under the Department of Women and Child Development. So the Secretary of the Department of Women and Child Development, the DG Prisons, at that time Additional DG Prisons, and also the probation head of the probation department. And we presented all our findings and our recommendations. And based on that, some of the issues were taken up by the concerned departments. But I'm sorry to say that more than 50% of the recommendations, nothing has happened. They still staying in the library. And one of our major recommendations was to improve the salary and the ranks of the probation officers in the state, and that has still not been taken up. Secondly, we talked about increasing the posts of probation officers. We talked about filling up of vacancies of vacant posts of probation officers, but these things have not really happened. But some of the other suggestions which were implemented was we had recommended the increase in the grant amount for released prisoners from 5,000 to 25,000. That has happened. Also, the budget allocation for grant for released prisoners has now been increased from 12 lakhs to 1 crore. So these are some of the positive developments that took place. But other than that, some of the issues still remain. They haven't been sorted.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
I think that we have exhausted questions. We can probably wind up.
Sure, sir. May I invite Angel? Angel, can you go ahead?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Thanks, sir. എല്ലാവരും ക്വസ്റ്റ്യൻസ് ഒക്കെ ചോദിച്ചു കഴിഞ്ഞെന്ന് പ്രതീക്ഷിക്കുന്നു. ഇനി വോട്ട് ഓഫ് താങ്ക്സിനായി അദ്നാൻ ഇസ്മായിലിനെ ക്ഷണിക്കുന്നു.
എല്ലാവർക്കും നമസ്കാരം. എന്നിൽ നിക്ഷിപ്തമായിരിക്കുന്ന കർത്തവ്യം ഈ ഒരു മീറ്റിംഗിന് നന്ദി അറിയിക്കുക എന്നുള്ളതാണ്. ആദ്യം തന്നെ റോൾ ഓഫ് വോളണ്ടിയേഴ്സ് ആൻഡ് എൻജിഒസ് ഇൻ ദി പ്രൊബേഷൻ സർവീസ് എന്ന സബ്ജക്റ്റിനെ കുറിച്ച് വളരെ ആധികാരികമായി ലളിതമായ ഭാഷയിൽ വളരെ നല്ല രീതിയിൽ തന്നെ ക്ലാസ് എടുത്ത ഡോക്ടർ വിജേഷ് രാഘവൻ സാറിനോട് നന്ദി ആദ്യം തന്നെ അറിയിക്കുന്നു. സാറിന്റെ വിലയേറിയ സമയം നമുക്കായി ചെലവഴിച്ചതിനുള്ള നന്ദി ആദ്യം തന്നെ അറിയിക്കുകയാണ്. പിന്നീട് നമ്മുടെ പ്രിയപ്പെട്ട ജില്ലാ പ്രൊബേഷൻ ഓഫീസർ അബിൻ സാർ, അസിസ്റ്റന്റ് പ്രൊബേഷൻ ഓഫീസർ അനുപമ മാഡം വളരെ ആക്റ്റീവായി സപ്പോർട്ടീവായിട്ട് നമ്മുടെ എല്ലാ പ്രവർത്തനങ്ങളിലും ഉള്ള രണ്ട് വ്യക്തിത്വങ്ങളാണ്. അവരോടുള്ള നന്ദിയും ഈ അവസരത്തിൽ അറിയിക്കുകയാണ്. അടുത്തതായി അഡ്വക്കേറ്റ് ജിനോസ് LGRFന്റെ കോർഡിനേറ്റർ ആണ്. നമ്മുടെ എല്ലാ പ്രവർത്തനങ്ങളിലും വളരെ ആക്റ്റീവായി സപ്പോർട്ടീവായി എല്ലാ രീതിയിലും നമുക്ക് എല്ലാ രീതിയിലുള്ള ഹെൽപ്പുകളും ചെയ്ത് നമ്മളെ ഒരു ലീഡിങ് ആയി ചെയ്ത് കൊണ്ടുപോകുന്ന ഒരു വ്യക്തിത്വമാണ്. അദ്ദേഹത്തോടുള്ള നന്ദി ഈ അവസരത്തിൽ അറിയിക്കുന്നു. പിന്നീട് LGRFന്റെ കോർഡിനേറ്റർ, സ്റ്റേറ്റ് പ്രസിഡന്റ്, വൈസ് പ്രസിഡന്റ്, സെക്രട്ടറി, എല്ലാ രീതിയിലും LGRFന് വേണ്ടി പ്രവർത്തിക്കുന്ന എല്ലാവരോടുള്ള നന്ദി അറിയിക്കുന്നു. പിന്നെ ഈ ഒരു സെക്ഷനിൽ പങ്കെടുത്ത എല്ലാ പാർട്ടിസിപ്പൻസിനും ഒറ്റവാക്കിൽ നന്ദി അറിയിച്ചുകൊണ്ട് ഞാൻ എൻ്റെ കർത്തവ്യത്തിൽ നിന്ന് വിരമിക്കുന്നു. താങ്ക് യു.
Thank you, Dr. Vijay Raghavan sir. Thanks a lot. We express our sincere gratitude for attending our session, accepting our invitation, and giving us a good lecture in this time. We know that you are very busy, and in your busy schedule itself, you find out that time and spend time with us. Thank you. And also to listen to many of practical recommendations from your side regarding prayers and other things which you are doing, and also from the point of view of TIS. We are so glad to listen to that, and I believe we all got something to take home. Certain things we got it from you. We express our sincere gratitude on behalf of LGRF Academy, on behalf of District Probation Office, Pathanamthitta, and as well as KELSA, Kerala Legal Service Authority. We are submitting before you, and also we wishing all the success for your all endeavors for the social work and social justice. Entire India, especially in Maharashtra and entire India, we believe it will grow and it will nurture good things to the society. We would like to keep in touch with you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I think, like I said in the beginning, this is a very, very important initiative, and I will be watching the developments through Abin, how it is going forward, because it has a potential for being replicated in the rest of the country. Because it is a fact that probation officers are too few in number, and they don't have enough resources to be able to do the job that they are supposed to do. So this can be a role for volunteers and NGOs in this area. And just for your information, the Japanese probation system is entirely based on voluntary probation officers. They don't have government appointed probation officers in Japan, and that system has worked very well for a number of years. So they only have voluntary probation officers who are paid an honorarium for the work that they do. So volunteers have a role to play. There is absolutely no doubt about that. And I would in fact like to learn from all of you some years, maybe a year down the line, when you have been able to do something in the field, what are the challenges that you have faced, and what can one do to address those challenges? Maybe after 6 months or maybe after 1 year, we can organize, hopefully not a webinar, but an actual seminar where we can interact with each other and we can learn from each other. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. I have also sent 2 articles, Abin. I have
Sir,
emailed 2 articles in that same email that came to me about the link for today's webinar.
Okay. Okay.
You can share these articles with the participants.
Sure, sir.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir, and thank you, everyone. We are just sharing the feedback form link. You can fill up it and complete. Thank you, everyone. Angel, you can wind up, right?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.